A couple weeks back, we looked at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and we looked at verses 1 through 3, where Paul was talking about some things that had to take place before the return of Christ. And one of the two things that he mentioned first was a falling away that needed to take place, and then the revealing of the Antichrist. And we've been talking about this falling away and what it may entail, or not what it may, what it entails, and the things that would be a part of it. And we're looking at 2 Thessalonians first, then we looked in 1 Timothy. This week we're going to be in 2 Timothy in a couple different passages in chapter 3 and also in chapter 4, and looking more about what this falling away would be. And if you remember what I've been talking about, that this is it is not a falling away of the world or the lost. It is a falling away of the Lord's churches. Because the lost have always been lost. They've always been fallen. You can't fall when you're already at the bottom of the stairs. And so the Lord here, or Paul here, and the Lord, is writing about this some more. And my purpose in looking at this is because we're talking about this as being a falling away of the Lord's churches. And I think we need to be prepared and be watchful to make sure that we don't fall into that we don't get caught up in it. Because here's the thing about it. It is a deceptive thing. Satan is deceptive in the ways that he works. And there, those that teach false doctrine, there are many. Most of them teach it in a way that makes it very deceptive. And we need to be making sure that we are not falling into the trap that has been laid before us. When we look here, we see a couple things within this. Whenever we look at 2 Timothy, we look in chapter 3, where we're going to see these times in themselves being described about what it's going to be like, what other people are going to be like in the world. And then when we get into chapter 4, Paul talks about what draws people away, why so many are willing to go in this direction, why so many are so easily deceived in it. And so when we begin here looking at 2 Timothy chapter 3, beginning in verse 1, he says, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come." In the previous chapter, in chapter 2, Paul is writing to Timothy, and he's telling Timothy, he's saying, Timothy, you need to be an approved workman. You need to be making sure that you are strong and that you are preparing yourself, because you're going to have to put in effort for what's going on here. This is not something that is easy. This is not something that is smooth. It's something that is going to require work. And in the latter half of chapter 2, Paul talks to Timothy about running away from and avoiding topics that are bad teachings or things that need to be avoided, things that are unfruitful. That he's saying, if you're going to be strong in what you're doing, if you're going to be fruitful in what you're doing, you need to avoid the things that will prevent that will hinder you. One of the things that Paul talks about in the beginning of the chapter, as he talks about being in verse 3, a good soldier of Jesus Christ, and this is in chapter 2. And then in verse 4 and 5, and then verse 5 specifically, he talks about an athlete and how the athlete does things and what it is. And then he talks about the husbandman, the farmer, and he's talking about these things and the effort that has to be put into it. And with a soldier, with a athlete, there are things that you want to avoid, right? There are things that you don't want to do. You know, as an athlete, you don't want to eat unhealthy because it'll make you fat and slow. If you don't want to train improperly because then it'll make you inefficient in what you're trying to do. A soldier has certain things that he does to protect himself. You don't just run around blindly. You train. And so when we get into chapter 3 here, he writes to Timothy and he tells him that in the last days, perilous times are going to come. Things are going to be hard. This is why you need to be strong. You need to be preparing because it's not always going to be easy, and it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. Paul says here in the last days, and this is the farthest of final days, and he says that it's going to be perilous times, or they're going to be difficult and dangerous, is what he's saying. That it's not going to be easy. Or in order to keep from falling, you need to prepare yourself, right? Have you ever tried to lift something and you thought it was going to be something that was very heavy, ended up being something that was very light? And you went to pick it up, and it might have even thrown you a little bit off balance, right? Why is that? Because you thought it was going to be hard, and so you braced yourself in the way that you lifted, in the way that you picked it up. You did it in a way, you braced yourself for it. You know, me and my brothers, we did brother things. And one of the things that we would do at times is try and pull each other or push each other. Every time one would be trying to go through a doorway and the other would be holding the doorway closed, and they'd have their whole weight into it. And you could step out of the way very quickly, and then they would fall. Could also be pulling on them and let go, and they fall. Because they're not braced for what you're about to do to them. So they fall. You see, Paul is talking to Timothy, and he's wanting Timothy to be braced for what is coming. Because if you're not braced for what is coming, you're going to fall. And in these last times, the closer that we get to the return of Christ, the worse things are going to get. It's going to get harder for believers. And the reason is going to be because the world as a whole, there's going to be less people following the Lord. So there's going to be more people that are against the Lord, that are against us. They're doing evil. It's going to make things hard. To make it harder. So we need to be prepared. And this is what Paul is wanting Timothy to know. Now we need to realize this, that we need to be preparing ourselves to work effectively while continuing to ride it out. I think the Temptation is there for us to give up because things are harder. Because it's not as easy as it used to be, we're just going to not try. You know, we have times in sports where a team that has no business defeating another team wins, right? Now, we've also seen times, probably, where a team just gives up on the possibility of winning, right? So we have times where teams that on paper have no business winning, they go and they put all their work into it and they fight hard. Sometimes they win. Sometimes they don't get beat quite as badly as you would expect. But then we've also had plenty of times where teams that should have been better lost because they weren't ready. Now, we talk about a lot of times a trap game, which is where you overlook a team that you think, oh, we're going to beat them, no problem at all. And then you don't prepare hard. You don't prepare like you need to, or the team doesn't prepare like they need to, and then they go and lose the game. So the preparation, it has an effect. We can't underestimate what is coming or what is already here. We need to be relying more on the Lord, and we cannot be wasting our time on things of no profit. Paul continues and he describes these people that are why things are going to be so perilous. He describes the people that are there, and I want you to take notice of these. That each of these instances are the opposite of what Christians are supposed to be. What believers are supposed to be. So naturally, when people are like this, it's going to place us at odds. Because we're with the Lord, and they're against. And the thing that we need to remember here, there are a lot of, and I'm going to call them churches, but I don't really think they're, I don't know, but a lot of them I know are not churches. They can't all be churches. But there are a lot that they see the world changing around them, and so they change to be more like the world. If we stick with what the Lord tells us to do and we stick with it, we are naturally going to be more and more different. And that's a good thing. But you need to understand, Christ said they hated me first, so they're going to hate you because you're following me. And so look at how he describes these people. He says in verse 2, "For men shall be lovers of their own selves. They will be covetous boasters. They'll be covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, such turn away." And so he describes them here, and quickly we'll go through these, and he describes them as lovers of their own selves. And they're going to care more about themselves than they will of you or anybody else. They will be covetous, which means they desire riches, desire other things that other people have. the most common way that covetousness is, it makes itself known is within money and items, material things that we want. We see somebody that's got a nice vehicle and we want that vehicle. And it's covetousness when we are doing everything we can to try and get that vehicle. A lot of times, theft is because of covetousness. He continues and says that they will be boasters, and they will be proud or arrogant. These go hand in hand together a lot of times. Oftentimes those that boast, they are arrogant, and those that are arrogant, they boast. And he says they will be blasphemers, which means they will be speaking against God. They will be saying things about the Lord or in the context of the Lord that is false about him. They'll be disobedient to parents. It will be unthankful, ungrateful, unholy, wicked. It will be without natural affection. What is natural affection? It is the affection that is placed within us that is the natural way. And we see people today going against what is natural. What is the natural affection? When it is a husband and a wife together, man and woman. And we see people now, they're wanting to have affection for animals and for those of the same sex. And we see those that even want to have affection for inanimate objects. And it's a lot, for animals and inanimate objects is a lot more common than you probably think. It is not an uncommon thing. There are people that literally want to marry their dog or their car, or people that are that way today. It continues and says that they will be truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent. This means without self-control. Look around and you see people, they have no control over what they're doing. It says they will be fierce and savage, despisers of good people. We saw this we saw it a lot whenever we were looking, going through the prophets, and you see this where they hated the righteous and loved the evil. They said that which was evil was good, and that which was good was bad. It will be traitors. It will be heady or rash, high-minded, and they have an inflated self-awareness of themselves. Lovers of pleasures, their own fleshly desires, their own things. And I want you to take notice here of the what he attaches to the end of this, that he says not just lovers of pleasure, but lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. Now, I want you to understand that God has given us things on this earth that is meant for our enjoyment. It's meant for our benefit. God, He doesn't want us, His plan isn't for us to, isn't that everybody needs to be homeless and without any type of enjoyment from this life. But it is meant to be done in the context of loving God. Which, when we look just a few weeks back at Ecclesiastes, where Solomon was talking about this, he's talking about that the world is vanity, except in the context of the Lord. That the Lord is the one that gives it value and gives it purpose. We can enjoy this life, but it has to be done in the context of the Lord, with His plan. And the reason for that is because outside of His plan is actually destruction. We can't let those things be more important to us than the Lord. What makes enjoying this life a sin is when it takes us from following God. But I want you to realize that these kinds of people, they are not going to enjoy anything that God's people are doing. And with these people being a commonality, it means that God's people will not be common. But I want us to continue here now and look at verse 5. I already read it, but let's read it again. He says, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. So he describes here a dangerous religion that is going to be, that we can be tempted of. And that there are many that claim to be Christian, and that even have on the surface, a commonality with those that actually are of the Lord. And I want you to realize that just because a person or a religion has common ideas does not make them of the Lord. They may have forms, they may have some things that are similar, but that does not guarantee that they are of the Lord. In fact, I would argue that it is the most dangerous, since it can look good from a certain view, but it is not. You know, when it comes to forgeries, what is the most dangerous form of forgeries, you could say? The ones that look the closest. We counterfeit money. Yeah, if you have two bills sitting, or you have 3 bills, and one is real, and 2 are counterfeit. One looks almost identical to the real deal, but the other one is a $10,000 bill. Now, you're going to take one look at that $10,000 bill, and you're going to say, that'd be cool if that was a $10,000 bill, but $10,000 bills don't exist. So I know that's a fake. But if I never told you that there was a second one that was a forgery, and you didn't take real close look at it, you'll probably pick up the other 2 thinking, oh, they're good. But you go to the bank and you take that forgery thinking that it's good. Maybe even you took it as payment for something. What's the bank going to do with it? They're going to look at it and go, this is no good. You may have sold something for $100 and got a $100 fake bill. And see, there are many forgeries out there, and not just forgeries of money or of art. There are forgeries of the Lord. There are forgeries of Christianity. Because Satan, he's trying to deceive. And so he's going to do his absolute best to hide it. Somebody that's actually trying to make if you see a $10,000 bill, most likely the person that made that, they were just making fake money. They knew what they were doing. They knew they were but somebody that's trying to make a $100 bill and they're trying to actually pass it off as the real deal, they're going to try and make it as close to the real thing as they possibly can, right? If Satan's trying to deceive us and pull us away from the truth, he's going to try and make it as close to the real deal as he can without actually being the real deal. There are others out there that they're seeking to destroy, they're seeking to pull away. They know full well what they are doing. And they're going to try and make it seem like it's not what it is. So you have to keep a very sharp eye. You can't just go and pick it up and then think nothing of it just because it has you can't just go and say, oh, just because it has $100 written on it, that means it's good. Just because it has Christianity written on it, it means it's good. Just because it has God or Lord written on it, doesn't mean it's true. Just because they say they are Baptist, doesn't guarantee it's true. There are people that claim to be ABA Baptists that are not speaking truth. See, just because of the label it has, you can't assume that it's true. Now, it's handy when the label says it's something else. And so I'm not against labels. But you can't assume that just because a label is what it is, that it's true. I have to take a very close look. And so Paul is saying there's this form of godliness, but really they're denying the power thereof. They're denying the Lord. They're turning away from Him, and they're turning others away from Him. And so Paul tells Timothy, he says, from such turn away. He says, turn away from them, leave them behind. If you know that a $100 bill is counterfeit, don't pick it up and carry it around with you. Throw it away. I'm pretty positive that if a bank gets a counterfeit bill, they're not going to give it back to you. They're going to destroy it. If it's play money, they'll probably give it back to you because everybody knows it's not real. But if it's making an attempt at a good counterfeit, you're not getting it back. You know, we can't just take these counterfeits and put them in our pocket and carry them around with us. You got to just turn away from them, leave them behind. And I want you to realize that these people, they are denying, they are contradicting, they are rejecting the Lord. And I want you to realize there is no such thing as a neutral party. Either they are for the Lord or they are against the Lord. In the context of the kingdom of God, there is no such thing as neutral. There is for the Lord or against the Lord. Can't be close. Now, how do these people pull so many away to? Well, if we go over to 2 Timothy chapter 4, and we look at verses 3 and 4, look at this. He says, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. So Paul is continuing talking about this, and he says that there's going to be a rejection of the truth. Because, and I want us to notice here that he says, the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. Now, here's the thing. The truth, sound doctrine, is not easy to follow. It's not. No, it's why so often we lie. Because if the truth were easy, everybody would be doing it, right? We lie because we think that we're making it easy on ourselves. Sometimes the truth is hard. True doctrine is hard to follow because true doctrine goes against what our natural fleshly desires are. I just talked about in Sunday school that these other, when you look at these other idols and these things, that the reason they're so appealing a lot of times is because they can do whatever they want to do. If it's a God that you just made up, well, you can say, well, my God says that it's okay for me to do this, 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 and this. Because you just made it up. He can be whatever you want him to be. That's why it's so appealing. Because the true God tells us things that we don't want to hear. And think about it this way. If we're going to agree that everybody is imperfect and that our God is perfect, and I'm going to ask you, what kind of God do you want to serve that isn't perfect? I don't want to serve a God that's not perfect, that's subject to temperament and just being kind of flip-floppy with things. I want a God that is perfect. Because I'm not. So if we're just going to look at it as a God being perfect and just and righteous, and we are not perfect, we are not entirely just, we are not entirely righteous. And of course, I say we have zero righteousness, but for the sake of what we're talking about here, then if you're really following that God, there's going to be things that He says that you don't like because you're not perfect. So if you ever find a God that agrees with everything that you want, it means He's just as imperfect as you. And I would say, well, what kind of God is that worth following? And so he says there's this time that's going to come when people will not endure sound doctrine, will not endure the truth. Be few. When Paul talks about the falling away in 2 Thessalonians, he's describing this for us. People aren't going to listen to the truth. They aren't going to want to endure it. They will want to seek after their own lusts. It will be what they want instead of what God says. And because of that, because they don't want to endure sound doctrine, it says they will go after their own lusts, and they shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. Now here's the thing. No matter what you believe, no matter what you want to believe, I'll say that, you are always going to be able to find teachers that agree with you. You're always going to be able to find somebody that agrees with you. Because there are people out there that the things they say it because that's what they know you want to hear. And so they're going to say what you want to hear. And so whenever the people that fall into this trap of wanting their own thing, they go after teachers that will itch their ears, that will give them what they want. They will have things that they like hearing, or that you like hearing. You know, all of us have things that we like to hear. I like to hear that I am a perfect husband, that I can do no wrong. Does anyone here believe that My wife tells me I am a perfect husband that does no wrong. Thanks for supporting me, Brother Mike. That's what I wanted to hear. There are things that Kenzie tells me that I don't like hearing, but I need to hear it. If I was being a jerk, and I actually care about her and don't want to be a jerk, it's not going to be fun hearing that I was a jerk, but I need to know that I was a jerk, right? But we can't fall into this trap of only wanting to hear what we want to hear, because that's not good for us. Now, let's think about it at school. Everybody wants the A, right? Everybody wants to get that perfect 100 on their test. But what good is it if the teacher never corrects the answers that you got wrong? Let's say that in 6th grade, your math teacher never tells you when you're wrong. No matter what, you're always right because you tried. Because your heart was in the right place. So they just give you hundreds all the way through 6th grade. Now you get to 7th grade, and you got a teacher that actually is trying to teach you things. And here's the thing about math. If you don't learn what you had to learn before, you're not going to be able to learn what comes after. So this entire 6th grade year, you were never actually corrected to where you could actually learn what you didn't know. And so when you got to 7th grade, now you're farther behind. You're an entire grade behind. Because you were never told when you got something wrong so that you could correct it. If you went through your entire life thinking 4 plus 4 is 6, and I just always told you, 4 plus 4, yeah, that's 6, because I just wanted to make you happy. That would cause problems throughout your life, wouldn't it? But hey, it makes us feel good. And there are times we can fall into the trap of just wanting to hear the people that make us feel good. And I'm not saying it's not good to encourage and to lift up. I'm saying that sometimes the truth, what we need, isn't easy. A lot of times, there are those that they listen to the lies knowing that they're lies just because they want to feel good. There's all kinds of examples that you can think of times where people just where it's somebody that the truth was right there in front of them and they just didn't want to believe it because to believe it was hard. He says, so because these people want to heap to themselves teachers, they want their itch scratched, instead of actually somebody that's going to teach them, to help them. It says in verse 4 that they turn away their ears from the truth and they turn unto fables. He says that people, they'll turn away from the truth. They'll close their ears off to it. They'll just say, I'm not going to listen because it doesn't make me feel good. Then I'll ask you a question. If you had some food in front of you and It was full of poison. I know it was full of poison. But it tasted good. And I said, hey, that's got poison in it. And somebody else will say, no, it doesn't. And I'm like, well, it tastes good. So, and I want to eat it. So I'm just going to listen to a person that says, no, it doesn't. Or I'm just going to ignore the person that says it's got poison in it. You see, we need to make sure that we're not falling into this trap of just because this isn't something that we want to hear, we're just going to say, I'm not going to listen. I don't want to be wrong, so I'm not going to listen. You know, I've seen people, I've even had times, I'm going to be honest with you, I've had times in my life where there was something that I didn't like hearing. So I just decided I'm going to ignore it. Just not going to listen. But see, we don't like being wrong. It's uncomfortable. But we can't fall into this trap, and there's going to be many that are going to fall into the trap of just going after what feels good. Just because it feels good and tastes good doesn't mean that it's not full of poison. Poison always tasted bad, or wasn't hidden really well by stuff that did taste bad. Everybody, there wouldn't be people that were always getting caught up in it, or always drinking it, or eating it. And it says that they turn unto these fables, and there's even people that provide opinions on accounts in Scripture that are so wrong that it turns the account into a fable. Now, you can take the truth of Scripture and you can twist it and you can manipulate it to fit any agenda that you want it to. But there's only one thing that is true, and you got to go into it looking at what does it actually say, not what do I want it to say. When you go at it saying, what do I want it to say, it's always, you're going to be able to twist it to what you want. It's a joke, but there are times where people do it. We all know the account of Cain and Abel when Cain killed his brother. Well, there's another scripture that says, go do thou likewise. Just looking at those two verses, I could say, well, you're supposed to go and kill people that you don't like. But we know that's not true, right? I hope you know it's not true to go killing people. But you can do that. But we cannot allow ourselves to be swept away by this. We can't allow ourselves to become these people. If you find yourself as one of these, you need to stop going that direction. Start seeking the truth. Even if it sounds better now, in the end, it's destruction. In the end, it's poison. Even if it tastes good right now, it is poison. And if you continue, after these verses, Paul talks to Timothy and he tells him, fight the good fight. Fight hard. Keep going after it. He says, these people, they're going to go off and do this. Don't let yourself become one of them. This falling away has been described to us as we've been told it's going to happen. Don't become one of the ones that fall away. Become one of the ones that sees it. Sees it as a sign that Christ is coming, or that we're closer to Christ. And keep following the Lord. You know, the reason that there are so many that turn away is just because it's easy. But look at just life in general. How many things are easy that have great value? Look at the Olympic athletes. You know, to some extent, they do have just genetic gifts that make them who they are. But every single one of them, they're not just relying on their gifts. They worked hard. They worked hard every single day to get to that point. Things that are worthwhile are worth the work. Following the Lord, it's worth the work. Put in the work. Let's stand and have the hymn of invitation. Now it's your opportunity to respond to the Lord. You know, I want to tell you this too. Maybe you're fallen right now. You haven't ever trusted in the Lord as your Savior. Now is your opportunity to become one of the ones that have trusted in the Lord, that have followed Him. Now's your opportunity. I ask you to take that opportunity. Now, for those of you that have trusted in Christ, I want to tell you, I want to remind you there are things that the Lord wants you to do that are hard, that are not easy. Put in the effort. Put in the work. Don't fall into the trap of just going after the easy stuff, because the easy stuff is going to take you to destruction. And the thing about it, the Lord wants to help you with the hard stuff. He's not just telling you, suck it up and get on with it. He's telling you, hey, it's hard, but I'm going to help you. I'm going to strengthen you. I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to be alongside you, and when you are weak, I will be stronger and help you. You're not alone.